Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well on this stupendous Saturday. That's it. It's Saturday. I hope you have had a good week despite the news, everything that we've had to deal with. But no, you're looking absolutely amazing for it, so you're not letting it get to you too much, which sometimes it's hard. And this week has been a difficult one. But we're going to get straight into the meat and potatoes because what are we talking about? We're talking about this. So if I bring your attention to Forensic Frenzy, anyone who is unfamiliar with Forensic Frenzy, I'm not going to comment personally on the channel, but I would certainly say that this video in particular is an interesting video, and it's this one here where Andrew Garrett discusses at Andrew Garrett or Garrett Discovery Inc. doc in interview. And this is a guy who I suppose you could say is similar to a Cy character. They have specialities in certain areas of data and communications, and he speaks about cell phone towers and tries to simplify the system in how that works. And the downside is what he did, which kind of made him lose credibility from a, what's right standpoint, I suppose, and that is that he came out straight out the gates attacking Cy basically saying that he's flat out wrong, that the software that he uses, which they're talking about, the ZX software, he's just trying to say that it just doesn't work, it's not used. Law enforcement, the people who Cy is claiming uses the software, he's basically saying he's lying. He's turning around saying that everyone's ditching it because it simply doesn't work. So he did make a very personal attack on Cy, which I don't know how this works, because I would say for somebody to go publicly and make statements about somebody in the manner with which he did in the professional arena, I don't know if there could be potential repercussions there. But look, it is what it is. He's come out, he's said what he said, he's gone on to a YouTube channel. I like the YouTube channel, I like this channel a lot. I think the young lady who is involved in this channel, who is the face of the channel, is incredibly intelligent. More intelligent than me. I'm just like a head on a stick. So yeah, she's managed to have this discussion, but he does raise some quite valid points, but it takes its time to get there. If you're interested in cell phone towers and how they operate, and I think what he failed to recognize here is he comes out of the gates, right? And it was almost like the best way that he felt he could raise his credibility is to attack somebody else's credibility. That I believe that because he very heavily falls on the side of guilty with respect of Bryan Kohberger, then he knows straight away that as soon as he does that, he's got people's attention. He's grabbed their attention, he's got their focus. Oh, this guy must know what he's talking about because I'm a guilter. I don't believe Cy. I've listened to the people who turn around and say this is junk science and things like this, which, that's an argument for another day. Point being, he went down that route. He went down the route of, to raise my own credibility, I'm going to try to destroy somebody else's credibility. But then when he goes into his argument, when he's kind of become more comfortable and he feels he's got people's attention, he then kind of argues the point that Cy was trying to make. Because let's make no bones about it, Cy, when he went into the court on behalf of the defense team for Bryan Kohberger, the main premise of Cy's entire argument was, look, what I've seen here, in order to get the responses, in order for them to be able to say, this is where he went, Bryan Kohberger, this is where Bryan Kohberger went, this is the route he took, a lot of that didn't come from the data. That was extrapolation of incomplete data. So they're taking the data that they got hold of and making that skeletal data, if you like, fit their narrative. Where what Ray was saying, in order for them to completely confirm and be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this is the route that Brian Kohberger took, that data is incomplete because it needs this, and this. And they don't have it, or they're not showing that they have it. And this Andrew Garrett basically says the exact same thing. You know, he's turning around and saying that the data is incomplete. Ultimately, in a nutshell, that's what he's come out and said. But he goes on further to say that this entire situation with respect of Brian Kohberger, the Idaho 4 case, how it's been received and how people feel, has been exacerbated by the behaviour of law enforcement. Because ultimately he goes to say that law enforcement are like a dog with a bone, right? So you get a situation where this crime happens and they don't want to let go of it. They don't want to admit that there's elements to this that they don't quite understand and that they need help with. And they fail to ask help. They fail to reach out to people and say, look, we've got this, but we need this, and we can't do this, because they feel as soon as they've let go of it, then it's no longer their baby. Do you know what I mean? And that's the feeling that I feel that Andrew Garrett was trying to get at. The biggest problem in this case at the moment is that now you've got the defense team coming out and they are adding specialists into the mix who are able to say, well, you haven't done that correctly. You haven't completed that information in order to ascertain exactly what happened. That puts the prosecution on the back foot, because what could potentially happen in the Brian Kohberger situation is that if it comes to light that at the time with which Brian Kohberger was arrested and charged for this crime, that the vast majority of why they did that was based on incomplete data, and that they can, the defense can push a narrative that this was all about confirmation bias, that law enforcement had somebody in their sights and they weren't even willing to risk digging deeper into the data just in case that proved them wrong. They decided to just roll with what they had anyway and instead try to gag everything and to push out specific narratives, to push specific things out there that would then hopefully carry them through the trial. And that's obviously why there's some upset over a potential change of venue, because, and I've said this before, their ideology around this case was always to leverage how the public of Latah County would feel about the crime. And you let enough pieces of information bubble around in the public, and for that to fester, it's going to be very hard for people to let go of that. We saw it with the stalking situation with Brian Kohberger. There are still people out there who believe that Brian Kohberger stalked the victims, which this is kind of where Andrew Garrett comes into play here with the Garrett Discovery docs, what went into the weeds with respect of how to track people online, what they did online, what they were searching on, what, connections there were, which it still raises then the argument, if the Garrett Discovery document that is floating about has any relevance to this case whatsoever, then how can, under oath and for fear of being charged with perjury, you have the likes of Ann Taylor and Bill Thompson, no, not just one side of the coin, but both sides of the coin, equally stating that there is no real connection between Brian Kohberger and the victims, with Ann Taylor flat out saying that there is no connection between her client and the victims, and Bill Thompson, when it came to the Dr. Edelman situation with the surveys that were done, he pulls up Edelman, stating that Edelman knew that the claims that Brian Kohberger had been stalking the victims or victim was untrue. And he went on as far to say is, you're going to sow that seed and that could be detrimental to Brian Kohberger's fair trial rights. So there's a lot of stuff floating around. There's a lot of things around this case that aren't clear cut. In fact, there's hardly anything that's clear cut. But I would certainly say if you're interested in hearing about the cell phone data and, hearing about, the back end, if you've got a little bit of, you want some Idaho 4 information, you want to listen to something that potentially has some relevance, then I would say go and watch this video. I will put a link in the description of this video so you can do so. But as far as I think about this entire situation is that by the time this goes to trial, a lot of what they're talking about in terms of programs and systems, they're likely going to be out of date because of the way technology moves. And again, in a nutshell, Andrew Garrett comes out, tries to attack the reputation of Ray, and then basically comes to conclusion that Ray was potentially right in that law enforcement just didn't do a good enough job. They got what they needed to do to get a result of an investigation on paper enough to convince people to try to, to at least charge Brian Coburn and get him in front of a jury. But it is that argument. Were they just hoping to leverage a biased community into convicting for the sake of a conviction? Let me know down below what you think, and I'll catch you all in the next one.